Okay, it's 3 o'clock, just past 3 o'clock. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is NK Tong. I'm the Vice President of REHDA Malaysia. I'd like to welcome you to this webinar entitled Economic Recovery Plan, Powering Up the Industry, brought to you by REHDA Malaysia. I'd just like to thank all of you for signing on through Zoom. We have over 200 participants and increasing, and also on our Facebook Live page. Allow me to just give a little bit of introduction for REHDA Malaysia. Today we have about 1,500 members representing the more than 90% of all developments that are done in Malaysia. REHDA Malaysia impacts about 140 other downstream industries and provide employment to over 1.4 million workers with 40 billion in annual salary. As an introduction, just last weekend, the Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin announced that the Economic Recovery Plan, aptly named Penjana, themed Bersama Menjana Economy. This plan outlines initiatives by the government to regenerate the economy following the challenges posed by COVID-19 pandemic and the implementation of the Movement Control Order, the Conditional Movement Control Order, and more recently now the Recovery Movement Control Order. This webinar, entitled Powering Up the Industry, aims to address the initiatives specific to the property industry, its challenges, and what we can expect on how our recovery will look like within the next few years. And to give us more insights into that, I'm happy to have four excellent panelists with us today. First, we have our President of REHDA Malaysia, Dato Engineer Soam Choon. And also we have Mr. Lee Heng Guie, Executive Director of Socio-Economic Research Center, SERC, one of the top economists in Malaysia. Ms. Serena Chia, Executive Director of the Sunway Group. And also Encik Muhammad Zaini Aris, Head of Consumer Finance at Maybank. Encik Zaini is having difficulties dialing in, but hopefully he will join us soon. So in the next hour and a half, we will hear from our four speakers, and then I will also encourage you to ask questions as you see fit. Now, to do that, please either type your questions in the Q&A box on Zoom or leave a question in the comments box on Facebook Live. Encik Zaini, is that you? You just joined us?
Yes. I'm just joining through call.
Great.
Sorry, apology, we have some difficulty.
No problem. I've just given an introduction to all the speakers. You're just in time. So to kick us off, we're really privileged to have Heng Guie give us some of the latest statistics affecting Malaysia right now. And in fact, some of his numbers are just hot off the press. So we'll open up with Heng Guie for the next 10 minutes as he shares the economic backdrop. Over to you.
Thank you, Dato Dato Tong, sorry. Hi,
just call me NK. Everyone. We're going to keep it casual.
Okay. Let me pull out my slide. Give me a minute. Okay, something I could not get my.
So as Heng Guie is bringing the slides up, I think what's interesting is there's been a lot of movement in the government to try and get the economy back up to speed. Dato Soam and the REHDA leadership have been to Putrajaya numerous times in the last 3-4 weeks to help put forward some of the plans that would help. And we're glad to see that some of the implementation is going to happen soon. The slides are up. Okay, over to you, Heng Guie.
So can you all see the slide now?
Yes,
Great.
Okay, good. So let me go through very fast. Give me about 10 to 15 minutes. I think the title is Will Penjana Revitalize the Real Estate Sector? Basically, I'll go through three agenda about short-term recovery plan, what's the current state of the real estate sector and the incentive for property sector, and coming from the perspective of economists, whether this will help to revitalize the sector. I think based on the 3 months now, we are under this MCO. Now we are in the recovery MCO. And based on the latest information that we gather under the REHDA team package, we saw about 2.3 million jobs have been saved under the wage subsidy program. Nearly 11 million individual cash flow burden has been eased through various support, Bantuan, REHDA, loan moratorium, and EPF, is Lestari. And about more than 300 businesses have been received various forms of assistance from the government, be it from the bank moratorium. So I think going to this recovery stage, right, I think business still face 3 C's, the cash flow, cost, and credit. The immediate challenges is about, how to revive back the demand. I think the revenue recovery is still quite slow, continue to face some supply disruption, cash flow problem, and operating costs. And the structural challenges, this is the most difficult one to cope with in terms of the behavior change in the consumer side. Because of compliance with the SOP, there will be intense competition in the online business and e-commerce that could threaten their survival. And based on the latest survey done by Soam, the 3 main challenges is about salary payment, no customer, and rental payment. So you look at the latest channel check, which I done as of yesterday. In terms of business side, as of 2nd June, these are the latest, about 12.7 million workforce have returned to work. That's about 83.5% of the total employment. And I believe with the recovery MCO, you should expect more to come in. The more people come back to work, then the more traffic flow, more busy, then people will start to pump petrol. That will create a lot of activity along the way. So on the manufacturing sector, unfortunately, I think the capacity utilization rate is still between 70 to 80%. And based on my channel check with this Malaysia electronic industry, the American side, for electronics and automation company, nearly 40% are operating at 100%. So 40% is slightly above 80, and 20% are still hovering between 50 to 60%. So these are industries which are in big demand in terms of PPE, rubber glove, electronics, food processing, and packaging materials. For shopping mall, we do a survey about 7 big shopping mall. I think around 90% retailers are operating. There are 3 reasons why you don't see 100%. Partly because some are still in the negative list, so they cannot open. And some are still very concerned about the SOP. They worry about customer walk into their shop, then later they found to be positive, then they have to follow up with all this sanitizing the shop. So all this deter them from open in a very confident way. And 3 to 4% have completely closed down their business. Okay, and the business hour likely to return to normal, 10 to 10. But the thing that I found out that the customer, in terms of how many percent they have fully recovered back to pre, there's only about 30 to 40% lesser. And in particular during the weekend, and look at the foot traffic, it's about 40 to 50%. And those who really buy is only 20 to 30%. So this is something that we have to ponder in terms of how going forward, whether this will be a permanent trend or likely to change along the way where people are getting more confidence. And hotels was 13 out of 14 hotels are operating. Occupancy rate is below 20%. And based on the latest survey done by the MAH, 15% will close their business permanently and 35% temporarily. And the hotel occupancy rate likely to increase slowly, very slow, for about 16% end June to about 32% end December. Based on the latest check, 7 hotels have closed down business. Okay, and restaurant and coffee shop, I think for those who, I'm sure you know, I think you can see that dine-in are constrained by the seating capacity. So we are seeing a capacity destroyed because of social distancing, because of all this SOP, and potential loss for key source of income for restaurant. There'll be more, as you know, for Chinese wedding is the month of August. And this recovery MCO still lasts until end of August. So they potentially can lose of a lot of income for the restaurant. Construction side, I'm sure REHDA know, CIDB side, in terms of the construction side inspected, is only 73.9% have not started operation. Yeah, those who comply is about close to 21.4%, but fortunately, I think there's only 0.2% have instructed to stop operation due to non-compliance. This is a sector which I think government need to focus on, because that will give you some support for the overall economy, given that they impacted about 140 subsectors. On the business side, I think they still face sales and operating costs, continue to enjoy the wage subsidy, help to save about 2.5 million employee for now. But in terms of employee, there are two things here. I think unemployment rate will likely to rise higher and higher. Maybe second and third quarter could see the peak. So I'm projecting about between 4.5 to 6.5% is higher than official, higher than the last two crises. And look at these numbers now. About 36,300 workers have lost employment, and that is almost close to 100% of full year of 2019, yeah, based on the EIS data, and 22% from manufacturing, 16% from retail, and 62% are professional, manager, executive. And unfortunately, these are mainly B40 and M40. They comprise the largest group of the employment losses. That's about 92.2%, earning between 1,000 to 8,000. So all this ERP, Employment Retention Program, so far we saw about 336,000 employees. These are potentially will be laid off, okay, likely. So this number could go up higher. So consumer side, I think the spending behavior will be adjusting. For them to come back in a big way, you need more confidence. I think it's important that private sector and also government together to raise up the confidence that things are under control. It's good that we saw the last 2 days, we don't see zero cases of local transmission. These are confidence factor that make people feel more comfortable to go out and go back to the normal way of doing things. Okay, so based on this Penjana, I look at it as a mini budget because it's very broad-based, targeted. Almost every sector, sector specific will be addressed in this Penjana. Of course, there are 40 initiatives covering saving job, reskilling, upskilling, support business, put some spending, revitalize investment. The one that sector they look into tourism, agriculture, food, property. But looking into the whole package, the whole package is about 295 billion. It's about 21.1% of GDP. I think in terms of impact on the economy, it should add at least about 2 percentage points to the GDP. But I'm still cautious in terms of the depth and the timing of the recovery. I expect the large economic contraction between 11 to 13% to hit the peak in second quarter. Okay, given that we will see the full impact of the MCO in April, and we started to open in May and June. Even now, there's still a lot of theme park is not open yet. So if you look at the latest number, I mean, we just saw the release by Dawson on the industrial output. The wholesale retail trade number is mind-boggling number. Contraction is about at least 30%, which is expected. It's a full month of April. So I believe all this contraction number will start to narrow. Maybe going into May, June. So I expect the GDP will be register a smaller decline in third quarter and start to see a positive, a very, very weak positive, maybe 2.2% in 4Q. So my forecast for this year is still minus 3%. And the worst case, it can be go to around the slightly above 3 to 4%. For next year, I'm expecting the recovery will come back. It's not that solid, but I'm still looking at about 4.5 to 5%. It all depends on the outcome of when we can find the vaccine and whether it can produce and fast enough to distribute it to all the country at affordable cost. And the other thing also look at the major trading partners. So on the real estate sector, in a nutshell, you can see that growth has almost flat, 0.1% in first quarter. Construction sector output plunged by 7.9%, mainly due to private construction work done, which is also a decline by 8.3%. So there's all reason. You can see the chart there. Property transaction in the first quarter contracted sharply both in terms of volume, 13.6%, value of transaction, 22.9%. And across the board, residential, commercial, industrial, agriculture, and development land. And these are the breakdown in terms of the commercial transaction. And outlook on the property side, the latest number is last year is 1.9%. All in is 7 consecutive years of moderating property prices. Selectively, you can see certain city has shown a decline in the property prices. And housing loan growth, because of the MCO, we can see a collapse in terms of the, not collapse, I mean the growth has slowed down sharply, both the application, approval, and disbursement. And the property overhang remain ongoing, stubbornly high. Yeah. So the numbers now, based on first quarter, residential sector is about 18.9 billion. Service apartment, shops, and all this can see from the chart there. Since 2015, we are with massive unsold and completed overhang. Yeah. So auction property. Okay, sorry. This is the auction property. This is another interesting chart, which I look at the non-performing loans, and we saw some rising level of non-NPL for housing that indicate more property likely to put up in the market for auction in the near future. Okay. So, okay, on the incentive for property, in nutshell, I think we, SERC or Chinese Chamber have submitted a lot of reports, policy recommendation to Minister of Finance, to Minister of Economy. I think we are happy that some of the proposals have been taken into this Penjana, and together, we work together with REHDA. I think it's never too late to have these measures to revitalize the property sector. As I mentioned earlier, property sector and the construction sector, they had about 140 inter-industry linkages with a lot of sectors. I think it's important for us to relook at the sector. I think after so many years in doldrums, it's time for us to revitalize the sector and help to support the domestic economy while waiting for the external side to recover. So I think it's a timely relief. Yeah, it will improve the buyer sentiments and help to revive the sector. But the question that we need to ask is, will buyer rush in or stay on the sideline waiting for better price to come in? I think people worry about whether there'll be more deflation trend in Malaysia, whether it's goods and services, including property. But I think for those who already wanted to buy, I think this is a very good opportunity for you to go in and buy now, or upgrade to buy upgrade a bigger house. But the question is, where will financial institution, our Maybank banker, will they tighten the requirement for new mortgage? I mean, we know that LTV 70% is taken away now, but it's still, I think bank will want to balance between the risk management versus their exposure to the property borrowers. So the further refinement measure which we hope the government can reconsider is to allow RPGT exemption to include commercial property, service apartment, and SOHO. I think if you look at the number of transactions, this particular segment accounted for 50.1%. So I think they can consider that. And also for company who own commercial industrial property, because some company invest in all this property as part of their business strategy. So I think during this downturn, they may want to cash out. So maybe give them some RPGT exemption. I think it's not too much. Anyway, the whole RPGT revenue is about 1.7 billion. I think can afford compared to the whole size of the 295 billion package. And the other one is we also push for the RPGT. I mean the foreign property ownership. I think it's very low. There's no elements of speculative investment, whether coming from domestic investor and also the foreign investor. And the time is perfect. People worry about Hong Kong stability. You know, I think money flow will start to come in. I think Singapore is enjoying all this money flow from Hong Kong. And I believe that with the weak ringgit and our prices are still very competitive, it's a good entry point for foreigners to come in and buy and choose Malaysia as a second home. The other wish list which we put forward to the government, I think these are, I'm sure REHDA had also quite consistent with the REHDA side. I think the cost of construction holding cost is still high. They should look into compliance costs, the capital contribution charges. Because of the MCO, they need to allow some extension of time so that they can deliver. And we are sincerely hope that the government in the coming July sitting, please pass the COVID bill is important. It's important for the business to focus and move on with the recovery stage. I think the bill need to be passed, first reading or second reading, whatever, complete within the July sitting or the latest by September sitting. We also ask for automatic release of the Bumiputra quota, and Bumiputra discount should only be given to first-time home buyer and for those up to 700,000. This is in line with need-based. You know, if the rich one, why should you give them discount? Yeah. So I think the other thing, we asked the Ministry of Housing and Local Government to expedite the approval HDA account and refund all this excess money at a very shorter period rather than holding on, and that will help to ease the cash flow for all these developer. And lastly will be the land lower land conversion premiums. Yeah. So these are the things that we continue to pursue with the Ministry of Housing, with Minister of Finance, and also the Minister of Economy in the EPU. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Ingrid. And yeah, you kept it under your 15 minutes. Just to kick off, coming back to you again. Oh, sorry. For those of you who are just joining us now, welcome to the REHDA webinar on Economic Recovery Plan, Powering Up the Industry. We have 4 eminent panelists with us today. We just heard from Mr. Lee Heng Guie, who is the Executive Director of SERC and one of Malaysia's top economists. We have Dato Engineer Soam Choon, President of REHDA Malaysia, Ms. Serena Chia, Executive Director of Sunway Group, and Encik Muhammad Zaini Aris, Head of Consumer Finance for Maybank. And I'm your moderator today, NK Tong, Vice President of REHDA Malaysia. So Heng Guie, when do you anticipate, I know you mentioned the GDP growth and all that, but when do you anticipate the market will recover from this crisis? I mean, when is the turning point, do you think?
Based on the economy side, okay, let's look at the stock market versus the real economy before we move on to the recovery stage. So now you look at the stock market, it's a V-shape. It's a V-shaped recovery. Is it a very good barometer to tell, to signal that, you know, investors are somewhat very upbeat on the prospect of economic recovery ahead? I think it's always about 6 months ahead. The market will reach 6 months ahead of the economy. But based on what I shared with you just now, and I also believe that the economy, the decline in the GDP will peak in the second quarter. And I expect the recovery will start to kick in very slow, still very fragile, and going into the last quarter of this year. And I think a solid recovery you should expect by early first half of next year. That depends on 2 things here. One, first we have to look at the prospect of the external environment. I think the major country like US, China, these are the major country, which how effective all the forceful trillion packages in terms of the fiscal side and monetary policy side, whether they can help to sustain the recovery. I think you must not forget this time around, the crisis is very different from the last 2 crises. This is about a demand shocks, a supply shock. You totally cripple or you know, destroy some of the capacity that cannot come back, and some of the job losses may not come back anymore. So there's a change in terms of the whole landscape. So all this it will take some time. So I believe I'm looking at a U-shape. So what you see now, the stock market may not connect with the financial markets, and maybe people are not in sync yet. I think the reality will come once the loan moratoriums expire in September. That will be the real test. And also there will be a lag effect from the unemployment and retrenchment, and that will impact on the consumer spending. But I believe, look at the size of Malaysia, whether it's coming from government side or coming from the GLC or even the institution, is 295 billion, 21.1% GDP. This is mind-boggling type package. Hopefully, it will have some effect in terms of on stabilize the domestic business and economic conditions. Yeah, there will be a lot of things follow up. I hope to see more things coming out from the national budget early November, and also there will be a economic recovery plan which will be crafted and likely to be tabled in Parliament. I'm not sure whether it will be between July to August. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Just for those of you who have joined us recently, please share your questions in the Q&A box on the Zoom. or if you're on Facebook Live, please add them to the comments box, and we'll get that to you. We'll get to them as soon as I'm done checking in with the panelists. So, Soam, I want to turn to you. I know you've been engaging the government quite a bit in the last few weeks in Putrajaya. What are your thoughts on the measures that have been announced? And is there anything else you'd like to see in the upcoming budget 2020 and the 12th?
Thank you, NK. I think you are part of the team that has been working throughout to come up with this package. And I'd like to firstly thank the input given, including SERC. I think they also been in communication. The first day of MCO, I still remember talking to the president of ACCIM on some of the things that we need to do. And we quickly delivered a letter to the Prime Minister to address our concern of the whole industry. And it's something that we have not seen before, whereby there's complete stoppage of work at site. And thereby no revenue, no cash flow. And at that time, we thought that it was only for 2 weeks or 4 weeks, didn't know that it then lingers on. And of course, we quickly also make our representation to the government to ensure that the reopening of the sector, given that the linkages to 140 industry and all this. So we were allowed under MCO3 to start application, to start operation again. But then the sad part is the frustration is that from then till now, only 25% of site has actually started operating, as highlighted by Heng Guie just now. So this is of a great concern, and we have been making representation to the government on this matter, that you ask us or you give us priority to restart in MCO3, but up to today, only 25% have started operation. One of the main reasons is there isn't an infrastructure that allow 100% testing of all the foreign workers and expats. Given that Malaysia, we have only tested 300,000 to date, the many months that we are in, 5 months plus, we only tested 300,000. Imagine we have to test 500,000 construction foreign workers. So you can imagine how long it will take, the queue time and the test result. And without the test result, you are not allowed to actually go back to site to start work. So that aside, I think we also look at the impact to developers, and we quickly then work with the working group formed by the government at the Prime Minister's office to actually look at and reassess some of the incentive or package that needs to be put in. Because of the linkages to 140 industry, our other supply chain and stakeholders also have been engaging with the government as well as to the importance of reviving this sector. And thankfully, through the various engagement with the various ministries and including the regulator, which is the Bank Negara, some of the initiative or incentive that we have asked for has now been accorded to the sector. And highlighted by Heng Guie just now, the home ownership campaign, the RPGT and the LTV. Of course, people have different views. We have seen a lot of gurus out there to say that, oh, this incentive is of no use to the industry because nobody is going to buy big ticket items during this current time. We may beg to differ. Why we felt that the HOC is important is because it's going to reduce the burden of the potential purchaser. And one of the way to recovery of the economy is actually to domestic spending. So by you reducing their burden, so we hope that people make a decision to buy the property. And for RPGT, I know there are a lot of developers out there, and even in the Q&A, I think there are some, I can see probably is a developer asking why did the government give this RPGT? It only benefit the secondary market. No, it's about providing an ecosystem so that for those people who want to buy into a new property, they can actually dispose of their old property easier. And the other thing is that RPGT, you don't forget, developers have projects that are completed or projects that are almost completing or going to be completing in 6 months or 9 months. So for those who buy from you, if they find a potential buyer later on, they can actually dispose if they decide to move on to another property, so that they won't be lumbered by the 30% RPGT or whatever. So you must remember, developer just don't sell property that are to be completed in 3 or 4 years' time. They are those that they are having their completion in 6 months or a year. So I believe that it will also help. And for LTV, I think we have been engaging with bankers. Later on, we can ask Dato Zaini, Cik Zaini as well, that this LTV are for those people who wanted to buy a property, but they want to leverage on the financing available in the market. So given the previous time, they can't, because they have owned more than 3 properties, and they felt that there is a market out there which will help the property developers as well. So we will see in the coming months. I think Heng Guie is one of them who's looking for a property, and probably is more than the third property So there are many people in the audience that falls into this category. So this could now be an opportunity. With RPGT gone, you can sell off whatever property that you want to dispose, and then with the reduction in input costs, the stamp duty waiver and all this, it will actually accelerate you in making the decision. And I think for now, I think it's a buyer's market so it's a good time for people who make gains from the share market, as mentioned by Heng Guie just now. You can then put your money into the property market, so that gain from the share market is crystallized. Otherwise, you are like in a casino. At the end of the day, it may be a zero-sum game for you. As to some of the challenges we are facing on the ground, I just want to highlight that I think Heng Guie mentioned just now about the COVID-19 bill. I think the Ministry of Housing is taking the approach that extension of time is required by all developers, and it's important that we approach this in a holistic manner. So that because not only developers are impacted, buyers are also impacted because they can't fulfill some of the obligation required during that MCO period. So a holistic and a proper approach need to be done, and hopefully this COVID bill will resolve a lot of this issue going forward to allay the fears of developers and buyers who may then be asked by the developers to pay longer interest, and at the same time developers will incur LAD. So I think this COVID bill is something that's required urgently, and hopefully that the government will table it in the coming July sitting. Okay. As for the other initiative to be brought up in the coming budget, I think highlighted by Heng Guie, I don't want to delve with it now because there are a lot of other things that we put in. I think NK is aware, he's privy to it. I think we put in a lot of other things, and we felt that some of those are under the purview of the state government. We actually discussed this with MOF, with the minister and also the Minister of Housing, things like the Bumi quota, unreleased Bumi, completed Bumi lots, things like foreign buyer threshold, reducing cost of doing business, because a lot of the input, premium and the rest are all under state government. So if state government don't play ball, it's quite difficult for the federal government to actually impose upon them. So those we will continue our journey to discuss in the coming months leading to the budget. And of course, one big items that we have been discussing with also the regulator, which is Bank Negara, is actually bringing back, in REHDA, we call it the Home Ownership Assistance Program, which we now want it to be regulated properly, which is another form of developer interest-bearing scheme. So we hope that this can be looked at in a regulated manner. We know where other stakeholders are coming from as well. So that's all I have to say for now, NK.
Thank you, Soam. So I think you've also answered a couple of questions that are popping up on the issue of LAD and developers and why isn't work starting again. I'm just staying with Heng Guie's presentation just now. Serena, can I turn to you and ask you what do you see on the ground? I mean, he gave us a sense of malls coming back into action again. What's the vacancy of your retail units, office buildings? How has it been affected by the current crisis? And based on Sunway's previous experience in global crises such as the Asian financial crisis in '97, how long will it take for the take-up rate to return back to how it used to be?
Okay, thanks, NK. This is the crystal ball question. Okay, coming back maybe onto retail and offices. I think property industry, obviously, from construction to property development as well as the investment, they are all in the whole value chain. We are quite encouraged. Of course, when the MCO started, everybody was caught by surprise. And there was a bit of a panic in terms of like, well, wow, suddenly everything has to close. But I must say that with the RMCO recently announced, as well as with the economic recovery plan, there has been an improvement in terms of our traffic count. Say, for example, our malls in the last 1-2 weeks or so, we have gotten back to a traffic footfall of about 60-70% of what it was previously. Spending power obviously differs. I think they are also coming back because of the confidence that actually SOPs are being adhered to. I think it is quite encouraging. Me, myself, I was walking around and when you're walking around, you see the COVID cases coming down, being announced by MOH, and at the same time, you see more people coming out. That truly helps build the confidence, and we do hope that that will continue. So if you look into the mall now, there are obviously SOPs. So I think what we did when it all started was we had to react quickly. Tenants and business associates and all that are all our partners. Immediately, we'll have to look at, how to support them immediately, sort of whether it be from rental support to flexible hours, understanding each retailer's issues, then we are able to help to address. Yes, our malls have seen the tenants opening up to about close to the 90% that was shared by Ms. Lee earlier. So that's encouraging, and we hope that with better confidence building up, that would continue. On the office side, we are also quite fortunate. We have a diversified base of tenants from MNC, government agency, and to smaller ones. So in that sense, again, if we are working with them, the vacancy has not gone up. I think for both, in terms of retail, maybe vacancy not more than 5% at this point, and for offices a little bit, 5 to 10% kind of things, which really is maybe the smaller outfits. So I think how we need to address this moving forward is there are different categories of tenants, the bigger ones, and then who may be financially a little bit better, and with all the stimulus package, they would be able to see it through. I think key to us is the business is about working together with our tenants, so we have to ride it through together so that when times are back, we can then enjoy and share the good times again. But at this point in time, I think we all have to bear it all together. So that's how our approach has been, and it has been good. So encouraging to see the numbers coming back. As for the crisis, well, every crisis is different. The last one was hard hit, and we were hard hit as well, being unprepared. And I think in Asia, especially in Malaysia, so that was also quite bad. So I think there were people who have learned from that time. So in this time round, maybe slightly better, financially stronger, as well as a bit better prepared, not to say that, but everybody is hit. So our banking system is still, it's got its liquidity, and of course for us, it's slightly better. So what we need to do now is actually, like what Mr. Lee had said and Dato Soam had said, in the end, I think key is about spending. It is about confidence coming back. The macro numbers are bleak at this point, as shown earlier. So we are the people on the ground. What we have to do is to adhere to SOP and yet excite people to spend again. So what can we do? So we have to work in terms of, yes, giving discounts here and there, promotional packages, but key is for them to feel safe in coming out again. We're happy to see, and so far being in an integrated township, from hospitals to malls and all, of course, theme park not opened yet. If people can see that we are taking that very seriously, there will be confidence in coming back. So how long it will be, I hope that, Mr. Lee's numbers will be something we'll all work towards, and hopefully if we can shorten it. It is a global thing. Yes, demand shock and supply shock. However, if we are able to tie the organizations which are able to sustain the economic activity via all the stimulus packages, if they're able to tie it through, hopefully then the spending will come back. We need the government to spur the spending, and bigger corporates, we are also reviewing it carefully, but we will have to continue to build for the future. Thanks.
Thanks, Serena. No, that was good. I like the point you made about needing to feel safe, because, looking at the numbers in Malaysia, sometimes I wonder if we've been too strict, because to date, I think now we're 118 deaths in total, compared, say, to the US, which has a population of 10 times ours. They are much higher at 115,000, with about 850 a day, which is incredible. But it does make sense, feeling safe, getting people out there, spending the money. So talking about spending the money, I'd like to turn to Zaini, who has the money, who lends the money. So Heng Guie said, the proof of the pudding is in the 6 months when the moratorium is lifted. How have you seen, and Maybank being the biggest bank and with the most clients, has Maybank clients taken up the provision to defer repayment or to restructure the loan? What is your sense about how businesses and also consumers are doing in this period?
Yeah, thank you, Dato. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, Dato. Basically, we saw that the taking up for 6-month moratorium is quite positive from the business, and I think it is quite reasonable for them to take up this moratorium because they will ease them in terms of 6-month repayment. And if you for your info, basically we saw that the numbers of people who coming in for this moratorium for the 6 months, we have closed almost about I would say 80, almost 90% of the customers actually applying for this moratorium. And I think this is something that definitely will help them to ease their repayment capability for the next, at least for the next 6 months. So that will help them to cushion, and then they can use those money they would not need to pay for the installment to support their either for business or for individually for their own consumption. So this is something that I think is really helpful to the consumers. Coming back to the questions, how that consumer in terms of impacted, it's quite interestingly that we saw that, for instance, the personal financing. Yeah? If you notice that in this kind of situation, people always go for personal loan. But we noticed that those numbers are not really coming in. It's quite surprisingly to us. We saw that the applications for the last 2-3 months, the numbers are actually going down. So meaning that people are a little bit more cautious in terms of to start new commitment. So we are not saying that because the economy is so bad, people are start rushing in for personal loan. So that's not the case, and because we saw the numbers is actually dropping in. In terms of the property market, if you notice that during the MCO, yes, we noticed that the applications actually reduced tremendously. I think that the developers as well as all the people who involved in this industry will actually feel that pain during the MCO. There are not many applications coming in. The numbers is dropped so much, but somehow rather we see that during CMCO, we saw that the numbers slightly picking up because there are some initiatives by developers to sell it to the customers by offering some packages. We saw the numbers is improving. So hopefully that with this Penjana stimulus measure, the 3 things that measured, the stamp duty, the RPGT, that will help somehow rather to increase back the interest of buying property. And I think from Maybank's perspective, we will continue to support this customer. Of course, we have the basic fundamental, there's no change. We always based on customer repayment capability based on their affordability, because that is always a basic fundamental of the credit, whether these people can afford to buying any property. If they can afford, no matter how many property, with the LTV is reduced to 70%, if they can afford it, in terms of repayment capability, I think we are more than happy to support them.
Thank you. And
okay, another thing is that Dato, another thing is that we also would like to emphasize upon that in terms of the businesses as well. I think the recently Bank Negara has announced SRF fund, and I think for your info and for the audience info, actually we have approved about 2 billion for the last 2 months, then benefiting close to 4,000 SMEs. And I think the approving rate is close to 80%. What it means that we still continue to support the business. On top of that, we also give some moratorium to these customers who are benefiting about 55,000 SMEs. So this is something that initiative that we do to support those businesses out there, either they are individual or businesses. We also have some of those initiatives that we do. We call it the online application to support SME. During MCO, basically customer will not have the opportunity to go to the bank to apply their loan. So what we do is basically we creating some sort like the online applications for the business to go, and we offer some loan, unsecured loan up to 150,000. The approval is within, in principle, within about 24 hours. Then that will hopefully assist them in terms of helping them to really have some access into the liquidity. So that's in terms of financing. But on top of that, other than the financing, what we do to support the business as a bank, I think people always thought bank is all about financing. But what we do is we do more than that. We're creating what we call it the webware through our M2U. We call it Sama-Sama Local. This initiative is actually about helping all the SME who are actually impacted, those small traders, small businesses who will be actually impacted by this COVID-19. So what we do is we put all their businesses into the M2U. So the customer can just call and then get their supply to this M2U. And we have quite a number of customers we actually onboard into this M2U. And we absorb the delivery charges for at least for 10 kilometers distance within the 10 kilometers radius area. So that's some of the things that we do. If you notice, that vegetable and flower from Cameron Highland also will be inside there. Kalau you are the durian lover, definitely also you can go into this Sama-Sama Local inside our M2U. So that is some of the things that we do just to make sure that our customers and SME out there will continue to be able to drive their business and support their business. Dato?
Thank you, Zaini. You know, we have 400 over participants on this Zoom call, as well as many countless others at the Facebook Live. So if you have any special Maybank incentives you want to share with homeowners, this is the place to go. But on the same question, I think there are a few questions about the 70% limit removal. Will it be applicable to sub-sales market as well?
Yeah, but I think we have no issue in terms of providing the customers assistance in terms of financing their needs, either the mortgage and everything. Even in a way that 70% so actually will help the customers will not to have to fork out so much of the down payment. So that will help the customers. And to us, basically, we always go back to the basic fundamental, as I mentioned earlier, it's all about affordability. If this customer can afford, they have the repayment capability, I think there's no reason for them, there's no reason for us not to accept that. So they're always a basic fundamental. But I think it was good in that sense because it will help to increase the interest. Because all this while, if you are buying the 500,000 property, so to call, you at least need to, how much you need to fork out in terms of 150,000 is 70% of the LTV. So now you can reduce a little bit. So it is all more about your capability to repay the installment. And of course, it will subject to your financial stability. We have to look at it in totality.
Thank you. There's a question from the audience as well, a few questions similar in vein. What happens if they bought a property between January and May because the HOC 2020 starts on the 1st of June? Soam, would you like to take that one?
Oh, okay. I think there are a lot of questions out there posted by developers. They are very eager to run the home ownership campaign, and they want to know when it's going to start. I think, NK, you are aware, you are the HOC chairman, and you just came back from Ministry of Finance discussing with the tax division on the Gazette. I think you mentioned just now the Gazette will be out hopefully by end of this month or early next month. And until then, I think there are a lot of details that has to be trashed out. I think today you have trashed out most of the issue now. So for developers, please be patient, and they'll come back to us. They will issue a FAQ. Similarly, for RPGT waiver, whether the RPGT 3 properties include those that they have disposed of previously, or is 3 properties to be disposed this coming 1.5 years. Okay, I think those FAQ will come out quite soon, and then you probably get a better feel of it. Otherwise, we may be telling you something that's not correct, 100% correct. So for HOC, rest assured, be patient, bring in all your customer now. You can start bringing in. We know that some developers started launching last weekend. Friday was the Penjana announcement. On the weekend, Saturday, the long weekend, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, I know a lot of them start launching. And some of them actually do full online launching as well. And probably they now want to enable the signing of the SPA via e-SPA. Of course, the current act doesn't allow it. So we are trying to see what can be done to amend some of the things in the current act to enable this, given the pandemic has taught us a lot of new ways of doing things.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that. I did just come back from Ministry of Finance. I think that the spirit is that we want to follow, or the government wants to follow pretty closely the 2019 guidelines. But as you said, we will have to wait for the Gazette to be officially done. To the question, I think there was a homeowner here who said that they might have bought a unit before that. I think they are quite strict about the date of the SMP. Has to be signed between the 1st of June this year and the 31st of May next year.
Yeah, for those from January to, there are people who have bought the property in January or February. So they're asking whether can include that. I think we have discussed with MOF on this issue as well. And I think the lag time is actually too long from when the last HOC ended to today. So that's the reason why they couldn't actually extend from that January. So that's why it started clean from the 1st of June. In fact, they wanted to start 1st of July. And we said, no, if you start 1st of July, nobody is going to buy property in the month of June. And Sarina will be screaming, So then they actually, luckily, they actually listened to what we said, and then it started off from 1st of June. So it's similar to previous 2019. The Gazette only came out in April, whereas the HOC started 1st of January. So this time around, HOC starting from 1st of June, but Gazette probably come out in July. So at least, you can start telling your buyers that, but let's not forget, so all the rules, you still need to follow, the 10% discount and all this, you still need to follow the similar rules as 2019. I think since we're talking about HOC, NK, maybe you want to take the question, whether the HOC this time around will be better than the last time, or is not going to be as good as the previous time.
Actually, I was going to ask Sarina, being the developer on the ground.
Yeah. Maybe we should pose that question to Sarina. What is her expectation this time around? Yeah. Given that there are two other additional incentives apart from the HOC.
Yeah, well, of course, our HOC did very well in 2019, and that's why first we have to thank REHDA. I know that Dato Soam and NK, you all have spent a lot of time to engage with the government, and it's very encouraging to know that the government is listening and doing all that they can as well to assist buyers as well as developers or contractors. So after a good success, obviously we will want to see it through as well. Maybe just, I can only hope to say that it will be, but in that 1 week that we have seen, we definitely have seen a difference. A lot more interest, bookings, as well as people who would like to convert now. I think, it's typically at this sort of time that people will be waiting to see what are the offers that will be coming up. So if the government is already also assisting in giving all these measures and waivers, right? There's nothing else, other costs that can go down. So actually, we are seeing people who are upgraders and homeowners. I mean, basically home users who are actually, wanting to buy for themselves. Actually, the property market in the last few years, it hasn't really been, growing very high and all that. And due to all this, restrictive packagings and all that, speculation has been cut off. So really, I think the people who are really looking to buy these days are actually real homeowners, and there will be actually demand for good properties and good locations. Even though we do know that there's always an overhang issue that everybody's concerned about. But we all know as well, property is very fragmented, is also very location based. So if we really drill down into the details as well, I think, people who would like to go for their dream home now and all that, this could really be a good time to look at a good package. It is really, like Dato Soam said, a buyer's market. So in that sense, hopefully the HOC campaign will have just as good a result.
Okay, great. It's interesting you mentioned upgraders, which means they have to sell the existing property.
Yeah.
And to Soam's question about or whether it's 3 properties for the life of your this transactions, or is it 3 properties for this year? From what I understand, but again, I think we need to wait for the Gazette to come out. three properties during this period. Just moving on to Zaini, you know, Serena said that there are people looking to upgrade. What do you think from the Maybank's point of view is the opportunity that, you know, the Malaysian consumer, I think you understand very well, you see them. What do you think is the mood for individuals to want to buy new properties and also the bank's appetite for that?
I think as a bank as a whole, we are still open to business. Basically, what we see is, yes, there are a lot of customers, genuine customers, so to call, they want to upgrade their properties, as Selina mentioned. We will no doubt that. But if they're going to sell, there's another challenge because certain areas, certain market, certain property, probably they have some challenges to let go their existing property before they can purchase the new one. So for the bank itself, I think as I mentioned earlier, it's all about affordability. To us, as long as if you are a genuine buyer, you want to increase you're going to do upgrading of your existing house, and you have the affordability, your repayment capability is there, I think we are more than happy to support. As I said, this challenge is now because people are still skeptical whether is it the right time. It's always about that. Whether is it the right time, or they are going to be impacted by the current economic condition, or I can still have this new commitment coming to me. But to those who are actually salary earner who continue to have a consistent income, I think that should not be an issue. Because they know what they're going to take home pay. And to us, that is something, the market that we can easily assess their repayment capability and their affordability. But those who are actually doing business, so the business will be impacted. So that's where it will be a challenge if they're going to incur the new commitment for themselves. And I think as a bank, I would like to repeat that we always open to business, but of course it's still subject to affordability and repayment capability of the customers itself. Because at the end of the day, that this commitment is not a short-term commitment; it's a long-term commitment. So the customer must be able to afford those commitments. Otherwise, there's no point you have the short-term. You're so happy you got the new house, but at the end of the day, towards the end of the day, you will not be able to afford to pay towards the long tenor. So at the end of the day, the house will have to be auctioned and so on and so forth. So I think this is something all about affordability. And to us, we are open as long as the customer can afford it. We are more than happy to support them.
Thank you. You know, speaking of the customer, maybe I can turn to Heng Guie. And there's a sort of related question. Will with the Penjana measure on the property market, what will be the impact on the sub-sale market? But as well as, what are your thoughts, Heng Guie, on the Malaysian consumer? You know, because Zaini is saying it depends if they can afford it. How are we in that sense?
Okay, I would concur to some extent. I think if you buy a big ticket item, whether it's car or property, there are two things here. You look into your income and your employment stability. As I mentioned at the very beginning, I think for those who have been long looking for a good price, location, and want to own a house, even thinking of upgrade, I think this is the best time given that interest rate at historical low. We are talking about 2% OPR, and if you translate into the lending rate, it could be about 3 to 4%. Yeah, and if you look back to 2008-09 global financial crisis, interest rate also that low, about 2%. It took about 6 years to come back to 3.25. So we may be in a long period of low interest rate that helped to increase your affordability. But most importantly, it's a big ticket item. You have to assess whether you are able to sustain and keep a long-term asset. But given that there are so many things that come in together, the goodies that the government packaged together for the HOC, stamp duty exemption, RBGT, 3 units of property. So I think this is the best time ever for homeowners, home buyers to capitalize on that. Yeah, of course, we don't want people who are cannot afford continue to leverage on all this gearing. That is something that I think the government will try to discourage. I think the onus on the banks work together with the home buyer and how to come out a package which is able to sustain, the affordability and the debt servicing capacity of the individual buyers. So I would think, in fact, after the announcement, I talked to a few real estate agents. I think they are quite positive with this, and at least that helped to give some what called the uplift the property sector, which has been in doldrum for many years. And I think it's time for us to move on to that. And if there are elements of speculative investment coming back, I believe the government can be very pragmatic. They can review again and see whether they need to further tighten on all this financing facility. But the other thing that I hope that REHDA can push also, in fact, from my policy paper to the government, I want this HOC to be a yearly event. Whether we can explore that, be an annual event instead of an event. I think last time when during the PH government, I've been talking to our former Minister of Finance that we should turn that into a yearly event rather than an event that you every time waiting for government to like give you the concession to have this HOC. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Soam, would you want to come back to Heng Guie's comment on HOC being yearly?
Of course, when the government give you the HOC, it's the waiving away of the stamp duty, meaning that the government lost in revenue. So, you must understand sometimes the tax division, they are given a task, they have a KPI, and the KPI is to look at what are the revenue for the government. Even the RPGT, it took a bit of convincing for us to tell them that don't count the eggs, and you need to ensure that the chicken is alive at the end of the day. The chicken is the developers. And what you are giving away is actually not for the developer, it's actually to help the buyers and to reduce the burden of the buyers. Stamp duty is about, it's supposed to be from buyers. So it's reducing the burden of the buyer. RPGT is taxing the gain on the buyer also, the owners. So it's them who benefited from it. And we hope that from this gain, they can spend on other things to move the domestic economy. I think it's about the revival economy is about spending and spending. So for this, I've been in many of the webinars, I keep telling the guy who can afford, the rich guy, please spend the money, don't keep the money in the bank. Otherwise, our Encik Zaini only pay you a miserable 1% or 1.5% for your FD, It's no use, you become poorer at the end of the day. It's better to buy a property, buy something else, So most importantly, we hope that we are at the start. The good thing is this webinar is still just a week from the announcement of the Penjana package. We are still, at the start of it. We hope that banks can be a bit more forthcoming in terms of giving out financing facilities. I think that's the wish of all the developers. Serena, I'm talking on your behalf now. That, banks must be more forward-coming, to give out loan to projects. I think that you are not concerned about. I mean, those projects that you are concerned about, we understand. But for otherwise, please be a bit more accommodative in giving out a loan during this period of time to all the buyers. It's very important. Otherwise, all this package means nothing. And also the other thing is about LTV. The LTV, I think in the announcement say that it's for 600,000 and above, and for the duration of the HOC. So we assume that it should start from the 1st of June onwards. So maybe I think the Bank Negara will give this directive to the various commercial banks. So Encik Zaini, maybe once you get that message from Bank Negara, you can probably share with all the developers. They will be eager to go out there to sell properties to those who can afford or who have ability to buy multiple units. You see, Heng Guie is nodding his head, No.
I want to chip in and talk about, it's about confidence. I think we have confidence, then you buy the long big ticket items. Yeah. So I think for those who income are not affected during this COVID-19, we know, I think there are people who are still enjoying very good sales, those in the rubber glove industry, those who are in the PPE. I believe they will take this opportunity to buy some property. But in fact, personally, I was a bit surprised when the Minister of Finance announced a 3 RPGT for 3 houses. I thought that's quite very generous.
I think, Heng Guie, they are listening in, after the new Gazette come out.
Okay, sorry.
I think this is what home buyers wanted. A lot of them have made representation as well. And during the initial engagement that we had, we actually got the MIA to come along. And, they employ 40,000 agents. And these agents have been suffering very badly for many months now. and most of them don't have any income for the last 3 months. So at least now, this week, they all feel very positive. After the announcement of the Penjana on Friday, I received calls from a lot of agents who were very thankful, that they at least can see a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Otherwise, it's all dark all the way. So we hope that in the coming months, Encik Zaini be a bit more accommodative together with all your colleagues from other banks. And then we have more activities both in the secondary and primary market so that we can create an ecosystem. It's not about just hoping that we as developer want the primary market to do well, secondary market not to, but we hope that everyone do well. It's just like prospering thy neighbor. So with the ecosystem is there, there'll be more consumption, our economy can come back faster, there the whole economy and everyone will be well taken care of. Loss of job will be reduced as well. I think it's important we have that spirit in mind.
Good, thank you. We have a question here from Chong for Serena, I think. What is the outlook of commercial properties, hotels and shopping malls in Sunway? But maybe also I'd ask you to talk more in general in terms of commercial properties.
Commercial, okay. Well, can't comment on the rest, but maybe at the starting point, and typically property is very location specific, and of course at the same time, accessibility and all the integratedness of it. So for us, if you look at say retail, offices and all that, we still hold a very positive mid-long-term view. We do feel that actually as an integrated town and all that, it has also shown that from this particular COVID instance where if you live near everything else, it's also easier, so you don't have to be traveling out. The key is really how to manage the current challenge now. With the awareness of COVID and all that, so with SOP or whether it be practicing personal hygiene, we just have to manage it through. And when things the confidence is built back, things like that, I do believe that overall the commercial markets should come back. However, though, this particular pandemic has challenged every one of us to review and relook at what we do, whether it be as a landlord, as an office landlord, how do you work with tenants? Because there is talk about work from home or purchasing online. Now, I think to compete moving forward, we have to work on both ends. We have to embrace work from home and then work with the tenants in terms of how do they redesign spaces where they will allow some people to work from home and some people who need to come in to offices. It was very interesting to see the Microsoft CEO coming out to say, probably about a month ago, saying that actually just working from home is also not doable because people need the interaction, especially when you need to brainstorm for ideas. And as a nation, we're hoping to promote innovation. How do we get better productivity and all that? We do need, and ultimately we're all social creatures. So how we view it is we do feel that it will coexist. Physical spaces, whether it be for offices, retail, F&B, education, and all that, they will coexist. I mean, even our healthcare center, now, we even have consultation. But of course, at the same time, there will always be, the physical need to visit the medical center. So, so the key now is how do we manage through the current challenge? And this is where, anything that the government can assist in terms of helping all the operators to see through this difficult times, including the banks as well, right? And I think we are very appreciative of all the moratoriums and all that are given to either home buyers or even businesses. So with a lot of tax incentives now that was promoted under Penjana, we do hope that will spur some of the bigger companies to reinvest. So in the medium long term, we do feel that it is still good, but we need to have the online, offline happening together. What we do see also is perhaps, say for example, if it's offices, we have work from home, actually there are new jobs opportunity from here. Now people will be wondering, how do we track the productivity of a person who works from home, right? So there are newer ways of now tracking. So the pricing of online, offline will have their own tier. We may, judging on how there's so much data available now. If we leverage on the digital technology and AI and all that, very soon, maybe in the longer term, people will pay for just what they want and what they need. you pay for the experience plus the product, or you just pay for the product, for example. So these are things that we will have to embrace as we go along, and so that, you know, the people who are coming to the malls or the offices and all that will still be there, and at the same time they are supported by the online community, so to speak. So overall, if you ask me on the overall, I think again, there is always concern in terms of oversupply. I think that has been said throughout. So in the end, I think in terms of oversupply, there is. People will look for, again, a good bargain, a good location. And in the end, the differentiator will be who manages it the best, who is able to give what the tenants want. So that's where we are all now being challenged to maintain that or to improve that. So choices are plenty, yes. So whether there will be a correction or not, we do hope that with, you know, incentives from the government, we are seeing more investments coming from, like you rightly say, those who are doing very well, glove makers, those in medical devices, or maybe new manufacturing opportunities coming from international. If we're able to give the ecosystem as well tax incentives, we do hope that will also help to spur the economy and get the engine back up running into the future.
Thank you. We have a question from Dan Gunn. Maybe Heng Guie or Zaini may want to take this. What will happen after the moratorium? Will banks need to rethink to extend due to the challenging economic environment?
Okay,
Yeah, I think I can take up that.
Okay.
Yeah, basically we have a 6-month moratorium, and of course we will not be able to predict what's going to happen after the 6 months. It's always a challenge whether customer will still be able to after the 6 months, or they be able to continue their business, their cash flow back to the normal. So this is something that we have yet to see. But what we are doing with our customer, basically, aside to the 6-month moratorium, we're always engaging our customers to see how their business, how they are doing, and what are the things that we can do to assist them. I think this is very crucial, because the first 6 months is just to see how they are performing, and subsequently we need to continue to engage them in terms of whether they require additional time frame for them to continue to support their business while their cash flow is impacted. So what we do is basically we're going to engage them and get to know their business, get to know their cash flow, and therefore we can advise them in terms of what they're necessary they need to do, either to extend the moratorium, or either they need to do some rescheduling or restructure the loan. So that will actually give them some time for them to get back on their feet. So we will definitely, we will not know what's going to happen. So we hope that with opening of this economy will somehow will assist some of those businesses to get back on track, so they can continue to generate their incomes and then to continue to grow their businesses. So what we need to do is we need to continue to engage them, as mentioned earlier. Engaging with the customer is important, so that we can determine the health of the customer itself. And they also can provide some solutions to them. We can also provide them with providing the advice and so on and so forth, so that at least they know their condition and what are their requirements after the 6 months. So that's the things that we're going to do.
Okay, thank you.
Dato, okay?
Heng Guie, you know, this 6-month moratorium was sort of implemented or mooted at the beginning of the MCO. Like Soam said earlier, we all thought it would be 2 to 4 weeks, but now it's you know, gone into months. So what are your thoughts on how this moratorium should happen? Because the two schools of thoughts, right? One says, well, we have to face the music at the end of 6 months. Another says it may need a bit more time. What are your thoughts from a macroeconomic point of view?
Okay, I think at the very right beginning, the reason why the government, central bank work with the financial institution to provide this 100 billion amount of the loan moratorium for the household, individual, and also the small business, mainly to ease the cash flow. Okay, so hopefully these people will know how to manage that 6-month moratorium money. Of course, some may use it to buy something to sustain their consumption. I mean, the necessity, or put aside certain amount, because eventually you have to pay, right? You have to, at the end of the 6 months, you have to back to normal. So I think based on some finding or checking around, some monies have been flowed to the market. That's why you can see some of the retail money are into the stock market. And hopefully they know how to lock in the game, because eventually they will have to face the reality that they need to pay the amount of the installment. And second thing, for those who opted for moratorium, they could be retrenched along the way or pay cut, yeah, or something that impacted their income significantly. So this is something that I'm quite concerned. I've been talking to central bank about what if all these people, a big chunk of them, being retrenched, and eventually they can't afford to pay the repayment. So will central bank again work out with the banks to extend the moratorium? So from the chamber side, when we talk to some businessmen, they hope the government can extend further the loan moratorium from the business side. I'm not talking to some of the individual household. I think this is something that I agree with Zaini that the banks will have to proactively monitor their financial condition, starting maybe from this month or July onwards, to see whether this group of people need some further extension, and then work out a solution, with immediate solution, rather than waiting for the end of the moratorium only you start to engage them. I think that will be a bit too late. Yeah, I believe the central bank with the banks will do all this engagement process, and some of the banks which I talked to had activated this monitoring their potential customer who may face problem even after the reopening. So at the beginning of the slide I shared with you, business are still facing 3 C's. Yeah, cost, cash flow, and credits. And these are not just the large one, but also the small one and the medium one. So I think they were hopeful that the government will further extend some of this loan moratorium or some further extension of financial assistance for them to ease the operating costs. This is something is a bit challenging. Again, it depends on how much the government can provide, either from the direct government budget or from other means to extend this support. Yeah, this is what I'm quite worried whether how much that will impact on the consumption, the spending of the household, right after the moratorium. And I hope those who know how to manage the finances, set aside, that this money you don't have to pay now, but you should set aside a bit in case you suffer a pay cut. Then at least that will help you to for at least 1 or 2 months down the road. Yeah.
Thank you. We have a question from Facebook. Jia Xin asked, maybe this one for Soam. Foreign ownership in some states are too strict. Is there any way the government can solve this? And there was another question that said, is foreign ownership threshold 1 million or 600,000?
Okay, I think there are a few issues that we address with the authorities with regards to the incentive that we have wished for. But all these items are under the purview of the state government. Example like threshold, property purchase threshold, is not under the federal government. The federal government only has hold over Kuala Lumpur, Putrajaya and Labuan. So the rest all fall back to the state. And I think today you probably saw the Penang state government coming out to make a statement to say that the foreign threshold will reduce to 800,000 in Penang. Even though the government in the last budget did say that the threshold should go down to 600,000. I believe that hardly any of the state actually do comply. If you don't even want to comply to MCO date, so I think that's the answer for you. And I think related question on this selling price of apartment, whether it's 600 or a million, again it falls back on the respective state government concern. But in Kuala Lumpur and federal government, within the government, federal government's whole, I believe that they will comply to whatever threshold that has been set. The other thing is regarding Bumi Kota. I believe there's some question there. Similarly, those are under state control. I think we have deliberated all these questions asked with the Minister of Finance and also the Ministry of Housing. And these are something that is outside their purview. We have asked the respective REHDA state chairman to engage with the State Menteri Besar and the Chief Minister. And the other thing that we believe, which is under the control of the state government, are the input costs. like premium and the contribution and charges. A lot of them are also under the state government. And we know that state government derive a lot of their revenue, 80-85% of their revenue from property-related taxes. So they also have to balance out between what they can give away and what they are going to get. So a lot of time they can't give away all, otherwise they will have a huge budget deficit in the state as well. So for the state, we will ask the state REHDA to actually bring it up again and again. And I think we have been bringing it up many times. And I think some of those questions asked were actually coming from various developers, and they were asking whether this is the right time to defer Rumah Selangor Ku, for those in Selangor, RSKU, I think there's a question on RSKU. So that's also under the Selangor state government. So the state chapter of REHDA, branches of REHDA will actually take it up and follow through from there. So whatever the federal government can do, we have asked, and there are a few other issues that's under the federal government which we will pursue under the coming budget. There's still another few more months, so we will move to there. And of course, like I say, the other way, in another way, now we are in a pandemic, the government has given us some medicine, whether it's a Panadol or fever medicine or sneeze medicine or whatever. And then in the coming months, we find that these medicines are not effective. There's still something that the government can do in the coming budget, like the end of the moratorium in September, October, since the budget is going to be in November, early November. So there's still time for the government to do something there. And I think 2 days ago, the Minister of Finance, through one of his Zoom webinar, did mention that for those category who actually needs a bit more time and because of the moratorium ending and they can't repay, start repaying, they will look at it on the case-to-case basis, which they should. Because based on the current blanket moratorium, a lot of millionaires and billionaires have taken up the moratorium, which they should not have. I put it that way in a crude manner. So if you are able, don't take it. Leave it to those who need it. And then the money that you have saved from the moratorium, for those who are rich, please spend it. For those who are not, please conserve some, as mentioned by Heng Guie, and don't go and dabble so much in the casino. The current casino, our real casino is closed anyway. So that's my advice to all.
And we have a question here from Yvonne Yap. Maybe Zaini, you want to take this. It's specific to Maybank, but perhaps we can broaden it to banks in general. Will Maybank be more lenient in lending or otherwise, knowing the current financial crisis?
Yeah, I think that is a very tough question, and I continue to repeat it. It's all about affordability. I think we never change that. I think from during the good time, the bad time, we're always quite consistent in our approach to our customers. It's all about customers' affordability and whether they can afford to pay the loan. And I think we do not want to compromise so much on the credit, because I think we have that experience before. You remember the subprime issue where we compromise on the credit. The impact is not only the bank, but the whole industry as well. Those who are actually related. So I guess this is something that the bank will continue to assess the customer based on their capability, their affordability. So therefore, we will not be wrong on those assessing. And I think we quite, to be frank, I think we have done quite a number of initiatives to support the industry as well. In fact, just to share some of the initiatives that we have done, we have come up with Next Home Easy, we call it, where the customer can have a pay less or pay lesser. What it means that it's a step-up payment. So the customer will have an opportunity. Those actually the new purchaser who coming on board, the first-time house owner. So probably at the beginning they have a stable income, but they still will not be able to afford to pay high installment. But subsequently, after some time, their payment is their salary is increased. So they will, after 5 years, so they can increase the installment. So we call it step-up payment. So that's one of the initiatives that we feel will help to support those who are actually the new purchaser. But don't talk so much about the credit, because credit is all credit, meaning it's all about customer affordability. Because we can't change that. If the bank start compromising on those affordability, and the repayment capability, I think they're going to be a challenge to industry. And if the bank suffer, not only the bank alone will suffer, the whole industry will suffer, the related industry also will suffer. Because we always see in any situation, there's always pocket of opportunity. And we always support that. Yeah. So to answer your question, Dato, okay. So to answer those who are actually asking the question, basically we will continue to support the business, but it's always based on individual itself, whether they be able to support their repayment capability. Not for 1 year, not for 5 years, for the durations of the tenure of the loan. So that's important. Yeah.
But Encik Zaini, I may want to add on this question. Are you going to promote this step-up financing in a bigger way? Because in our engagement with the central bank and also with MOF, I think central bank told us that they have no restriction on this step-up financing, because we did ask for a longer tenure of the loan of up to 40 years or up to age 70. But because when you add up the absolute sum of 35 years and 40 years, I think based on the current mortgage rate of 3.3%, there's still a gap of 50,000. So that's why, and also Bank Negara, when they make a comparison with the other countries around this region, they say most of the country only have a maximum limit of 30 years. So we have gone to 35 years. Of course, the government has given, the central bank has given a waiver for property below 300,000 to go up to 40 years or age 70. So then this step-up financing came in, and when we did some simulation with the moratorium for principal repayment the first 5 years, you only pay the interest. I think there's for 500,000 loan, there's something like a saving of 200 ringgit a month in terms of repayment. But after 5 years, of course, the repayment will be slightly more. It's only 50 ringgit more, okay, 50, 60 ringgit more. And at the end of the tenure of 35 years, the absolute sum is negligible. So I think banks should now go out there and promote this in a bigger way. And I still remember, because NK sits on the Stand Chart board, the Minister of Finance told him, because I keep selling this, and he said, hey, please remember, you please ask Standard Chart also to promote this step-up financing, So we went away from that meeting, and we hope that, after all that we have said, we come back to financing again. I think, Serena, if you can agree with me, this, without the financing, whatever method is of no use. So this step-up financing may be a way out for people who can pay lesser now. And then with the mortgage rate coming down, this is an opportunity for a lot of people. Like just now, Heng Guie, you're saying that moratorium, you are concerned that they still cannot do anything. If they have bought the property more than 10 years ago, I think no problem. They can just restructure the loan based on your R&R, and based on the low interest rate now, they can probably plow through the period, unless they remain unemployed for the next 3 years, then it's a problem. But if it's for a short-term period, I think they can get through. No problem at all. And probably it's right time for them to refinance as well, their property. So I think there are things that can be done, that needs to be done. And I think probably bank can play a bigger role this time around. We know some of the challenges that you are facing. We will talk to you on a separate occasion between REHDA and the banks. But out there, we need to see what can be done to help the whole industry here.
Okay, thank you.
So I think sorry, Dato NK, if I may just add in what Dato Soam mentioned. I think to the banks, I think we also require some assistance and support from the developers, the players in industry as well, because I think this is very crucial. Because we are also in the same industry. We support you. You also need to support us in a way, kan? So basically, what we require is transparency from the developer itself. So at least we can have a clear business relationship, rather than it's just a one way where you will continue to push the bank to give the lending. But at the same time, we will find the difficulty because it's not transparent in terms of the pricing, the purchase price, the SMP. So this is something that we really need to work on. Yeah. Okay.
We're almost out of time, but I'd like to give each of our panelists maybe 30 seconds for your concluding thoughts, starting with you, Heng Guie. You're on mute.
Okay, sorry. I hope this recovery of the economic recovery will come by, and And I would compliment the government so far in terms of managing the COVID cases. I think at least we stood up quite good among the ASEAN country. I think the next step now from the recovery stage is to revitalize and also to reform. I think that's more important in terms of structural, to address some of the structural issue of the country. I think the last concern I have now is about political stability. That is important. If you want to attract FDI, whether into the property sector, whether into other industry, I think the macro policy alone is not good enough. We also have to make sure that there's a political stability. Thank you.
Thank you. Serena?
I think maybe one thing that I think we have all, if we can summarize, everything is interrelated. So maybe to respond to Ms. Chezaini as well, yes, I think for the bank to lend, we also need the economy to be churning and for employment to continue. So maybe my request would be like what Dato Soam says, for those who can afford to and have calculated accordingly, this really is a good time to spend. We do know, and I think the government and private sector, public sector, everyone is aware that spending is key. And once spending is there, then everything else will follow accordingly. So this is where, and especially since we're talking about property, obviously it is a good time, seeing that low interest rate is there. So I will hope to see that this HOC becoming another success.
Thank you. And Zaini?
Okay, to me, I think as a bank, we will continue to support our community because we are part of the community, and we continue to support the businesses because if they fail, we also as a bank will fail. So we will continue to provide whatever necessary support and assistance to all our customers, our business partners. So therefore, they will continue to sustain the business. Then we also can continue to be with them together during the difficult time, the good time, and of course, if they do well, we also will do well. So of course, this we do not know how long it will last. These situations. I think for our business partner, I think we will continue to engage them. And as Mr. Lee said earlier, we have continued to start early in terms of engaging our customers to see how that we can be in their assistance. So therefore, they will continue to go through this difficult time. So therefore, we also will be there as part of their families, their friends, and also their banker. So that's all.
And Soam?
Okay, I probably want to say this because of the pandemic, there are a lot of new things that we have learned, and I think that like Heng Guie said, the government through the Ministry of Health has done well in controlling the spread of the COVID-19. I think public health is of most important, but then the recovery of our sector is the worst. You can see from the figures given by Heng Guie just now. I think we are the worst, and of course we have linkages to another 140 other industry, and the supply chain and the other stakeholders will be badly affected as well if we don't come back quickly. We hope that there are government people listening in. I think I've made enough representation at the various level on this problem, and I think our counterpart in Master Builder also have been making this. I say we have made it known to many of the ministers, including the Minister of Work recently during engagement on the 2nd of June. We hope that this can be accelerated. The other thing is the government's formula is 6R. So they have now gone to the 4R, which is the recent recovery, the revitalization and the reform needs to be done. And I hope that the reform this time around, when they do it, probably is a mid to longer term, a 5 years plan, because we are coming into the 12 Malaysia plan as well. They can really look at reforming the things that need to be reformed. Don't make it a lip service and then be like a KPI driven. You just tick the box to say you have done 99% of the thing. You know, the operation is successful, but the patient mati already. So this time around, we hope that it has to be a concerted effort. And for us in the construction industry, we know that the utilization of foreign labor will not be the same going forward. So I think it has to be a clear message to all the industry players. Do it early so that everyone is aware of what is going to befall on them. And at least they can embrace it very quickly. Example, just like the Act 446, the need to provide accommodation to the standard required under the Act. And to give us just 3 months notice to provide for it, I think it's a tall order for everyone. Of course, those are examples, and we believe this is a time for people to want to embrace. Because previously, when you talk about change and whatever, most people just don't care. So this is the time to look at digitalization, to look at the best practices in the industry. And of course, now I'm representing REHDA, I would like to say, we want to advocate the best practices possible. And into Encik Zaini, I think since the last many months, I've been engaging with your site and also APM on some of the best practices that developers should do to ensure that we all survive. And I think during our engagement with the Minister of Finance, he did mention the biggest group of people you lend to are related to property. I mean, the broad lending of the banks actually to the broad property sector, to both developers and also the buyers of mortgage. And if this sector is distressed or have problem, I think banks also going to have a lot of problems. So it's important that this ecosystem continue to live on and prosper so that our economy can revive very quickly. That's my parting word. Thanks, NK.
All right, thank you. And so on behalf of REHDA Malaysia, I'd like to thank our panelists, Mr. Lee Heng Guie from SERC, Encik Muhammad Zaini Aris from Maybank, Ms. Rina Chia from Sunway, and our very own Dato Soam, President of REHDA. And also like to thank the 350 of you who stayed on to the end on the Zoom call, as well as those of you on Facebook Live. It's been a pleasure. I'm NK Tong. Thank you for this opportunity to moderate this call, and we will end this call now. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.